I invite you to stand for the reading of the Gospel. Today comes from Matthew 25, verses 14 and 30. This is part of some parables that Jesus has been telling about the realm of heaven. Jesus says, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled account with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, and saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I've made 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master.' Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave. You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received that what was mine, my own, with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to those who have, more will be given, and they will have in abundance. But those who have nothing, even what they have, will be taken away. And as for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.'" Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. The novel A Tree Grows in Brooklyn retells the story of an Irish immigrant family living in New York City in the first couple of decades of the 20th century. The family was poor, and it sought to make the best of their situation. In order to improve their circumstances as a family, they needed to be resourceful, work very hard, and save as much as they could. And as one often finds in these immigrant stories, it's the matriarch whose ingenuity and sacrifice makes it possible for the family to be fed, nurtured, and to be safe. The mom in the story took an empty tin can and made a slot at the bottom of the can to make a kind of a piggy bank. Only what she did to the top was she split it and peeled it back in sections. So if you looked at it head on, it looked like little tiny petals coming off the center of a flower. And then she placed that can with petals flared down on the floor in her closet. And she took a hammer and nails and pounded a nail in each one of those little tiny petals against the floor, securing the can with a little slot up above so that she could insert coins. That was clever. Because if you save your pennies and nickels, maybe even quarters, in a coffee jar, it's all too tempting to go unscrew that jar and whittle away the savings little by little. And so every week she would go to her closet and she would add to the treasure in that can with big hopes for the future. But sadly, inevitably, an emergency would come. And with pain in her heart, she would go to that closet, hammer in hand, pry away the tin petals from the floor to release that hard-saved cash. Oh, and she was grateful that she had it. She hated doing it. But she needed to get her family out of the latest bind. But no sooner had she depleted the savings, she would find another tin can, cut a slot at the bottom, made the flared tin petals, and with hammer and nails in hand, go back to the closet, determined to make her hopes materialize. The parable which Jesus shared about these servants and this master presents us with actually quite a few challenges in order to understand it. Well, for one, if we interpret that this master is God, that sure doesn't make God look so good. That master is fickle and harsh. And secondly, there were rules in the scriptures against lending money for interest. And there was a sense in the culture of the time that if somebody was going to get richer, it was because somebody was getting poorer. It sounded to them like a selfish thing. And here's the master celebrating those two other servants who were making more money, doubled his money. And then lastly, that slave with the 1 talent. He's the only one who abides by that rule that you don't make cash off of somebody. And so he buries that money in the backyard. A talent was a lot of money. It's like 15 years worth of salary for a person. And yet, he's the one that ends up getting kicked out of the household. What are we to make with this upside-down story? Well, for one, we got to consider the plight of that last servant. He was petrified that he would mess up. If he had asked some of the other slaves for help, he would have gone into questionable forays, and he risked losing some or all of his master's money. His master's money. So his default decision was to play it safe, to bury the money in the backyard. Because there would be no risk of losing it. No risk of the master being angry. But the trouble is, his motivation was fear. It wasn't a desire to do something safe with what was entrusted to him. It was a desire out of fear to be safe. Had the master wanted the money buried, he would have simply said, take this, go bury it in the backyard. There was in effect an expectation from the master that this person would do something with that money. The master also didn't say, now you make me some money whether you cheat somebody or not. What ought to have become the motivation for the slave was the realization that he was being entrusted with something from his master that was very valuable. That the master saw something in him that made him trust that slave. With that trust might have come a dream of something hopeful and faithful for his future as a person, but maybe also for his master. An opportunity to feel the honor of receiving something from the master, and then perhaps an opportunity to connect with the community at large. Because remember, these particular situations in the ancient world, these masters were benevolent to the community, and so maybe this was part of a way in which this servant could be connected, could invest in the life of a community that is dependent for benevolence from that master. Today, we have welcomed 4 new members into the church, one especially through baptism. During the congregational meeting after worship, we are going to elect officers, new elders, new deacons to serve in the church. And I don't know if they think of themselves, all these people, if they think of themselves as being courageous and hopeful, but I think that they are. Their courage and their hope is rooted in the willingness to be on a journey together with you, my brothers and sisters. You who are ready to be a part of this experience. You who promised to be a part of their experience of faith. We are people who are called to that journey, which inevitably will have moments of success and moments when we are uncertain about what comes next. But like that immigrant matriarch in the novel, her journey always involved looking forward with that fierce love of her family in a little tin can, which did not fearfully hide valuable coins, like in the slave in the story in the parable. But instead, that little can held savings prepared with hope for the moments when they could be used for the most help. God has entrusted us with a community, with a message of love. And we are challenged to take that responsibility with a hopeful sense, not a fearful disposition. We may feel the weight of that responsibility, but also feel the pride, or the humble pride at least, of knowing that we've been trusted with something so important. And far from trying to dig a hole in the backyard to escape responsibility, we get challenged to bring what we have to the forefront, whether it be a little or a lot. We remember that sharing the message of God's love is how we invest our lives in the lives of our congregation and our community. But it has to be done out of hope, faithful to the trust that has been given to us. The message of God's love entrusted to us would be dishonored and wasted if it ended up just getting secretly buried in the backyard. Thanks be to God for God's word for us.